What's up YouTube, Saf here on Super Saf TV, and this is my hands-on comparison of the Samsung Galaxy S4 to the Samsung Galaxy S3. Now I did a spec comparison of these two some time ago, and that video is on well over 500,000 views, so thanks to everyone who watched, commented and liked on that video. Really appreciate it. But now that we've got both of these devices in hand, we can get a bit more of an in-depth idea of the differences between these two. So do hit that thumbs up button and let's get straight to it. So initially looking at the design, size and build between these two, they look very similar, and at a glance from distance you'd probably think they were the same handset. However, there are some differences. The S3 has more rounded edges compared to the S4, and from the side the S4 is a bit more blocky, whereas the S3 was a little bit more curved along the back as well. You can see the edge here on the S4 is continuous and all the way around, whereas the S3 has a bit more of a curve, so that chrome effect plastic on here is slightly different as well. In terms of size, the S4 is slightly smaller than the S3, nothing majorly noticeable, slightly smaller in width, and it's also very slightly thinner, only 0.7 millimeters, so nothing huge here. Both have the polycarbonate casing. However, the S4 has this textured sort of backing, which gives you looks plain in certain angles, and then in other angles you can see a bit of a textured background, whereas the S3 has a plain plastic background. Now looking around the devices, initially looking on the top, both have a 3.5mm headphone jack on the top. Mics are in slightly different positions, and the S4 has an IR blaster, which the S3 doesn't. On the right hand side, both have a power button in a similar place. However, the S4 has a slightly different power button to the S3. On the bottom, both have a micro USB port as well as mics, again slightly different positions. And looking on the right hand side, both have the volume rocker, again in slightly different positions. At the back, you can see that the flash position on the S4 is below the camera, whereas on the S3 it's on the side. Also, the loudspeaker is in different positions. On the S3 it's near the camera, whereas on the S4 it's down below. On the front, again looking very similar, however the button is slightly different in terms of the design of the S3. Again, minor cosmetic changes and nothing huge here. Weight wise, the S4 is 3 grams lighter than the S3. Once again, nothing major. What is major is the screen. And now the S4 has a 5-inch screen, whereas the S3 has a 4.8-inch screen. So it's really great to see that Samsung have managed to get a larger screen in roughly about the same area, which is very impressive. Now both have a Super AMOLED capacitive touchscreen. However, the S4 has a full HD 1080p resolution, whereas the S3 has a 720p HD resolution. Now in terms of pixels per inch, that means that the S3 has a 306 ppi pixel density, whereas the S4 has 441 ppi pixel density. Now in terms of quality, yes, it is noticeable because it's a significantly higher PPI, so the images and video on the S4 do look that little bit better, and 1080p videos on the S4 are going to give you pixel for pixel, so you're going to get that full HD experience, whereas the S3 is going to be scaled down to that 720p resolution. So that's mainly the difference here. Now it really depends on how important resolution is to you. For most people, the S3 is going to be more than sufficient and the resolution is really great, but the S4 is just that much better, so it really depends on what you prefer. Personally, I think the S3 is still a great screen. One thing that's different on the S4 is that it has a super sensitive screen. So if you switch on the high sensitivity setting within the options, you're going to be able to use the S4 with gloves, which is a very big advantage. You cannot do that with the S3. Now looking at the processor and performance, the S4, this current version, is the quad-core 1.9 GHz version with 2 GB of RAM. It's not the octa-core version, which is currently not widely available. The S3, I've got the international version here, so it's the quad-core 1.4 GHz version with 1 GB of RAM. So it's not the dual-core US version. Now in terms of benchmarks, the S4 is performing much higher and definitely is a better performer overall. So let's have a look at a few tests and see what the differences are like. So starting off with the boot test, switching both of these devices on at the same time, the S3 loaded up a tad second, literally a split second before the S4 did, but very similar times there. In terms of a browser test, loading up The Verge, which is a very heavy website, it did load up slightly quicker on the S4, and that's both the mobile and the desktop version using articles. However, not a huge deal of difference in terms of speed on general usage. Now overall, the S4 is better for multitasking and heavier tasks because it's got more of a higher processor. So if you're going to be doing lots of gaming, etc., and using those higher demanding apps and using lots at the same time, then the S4 is undoubtedly going to be a better performer overall. Even if it's not by a huge margin, it is going to be a better performer. Now moving on to the cameras, and the S4 has a 2 megapixel front-facing camera that's capable of filming 1080p HD, whereas the S3 has a 1.9 megapixel front-facing camera capable of filming 720p HD. The rear-facing cameras, the S4 has a 13 megapixel camera with 1080p. The S3 has an 8 megapixel camera with 1080p. Now if you want to see side-by-side comparisons and a detailed comparison on the cameras, then I've done a separate video. There'll be a link in the description below as well as an annotation on screen, so do go ahead and check that out. I've done a full detailed comparison there, so you can check that out. But to put it in a nutshell, the S4 does have a much better front-facing camera. In terms of the rear-facing camera, in decent light they both produce similar images. However, the S4 is got the high resolution of 13 megapixels. In low light though, the S4 does perform better, and it also has much better audio recording, so you're going to be getting a much higher quality audio on the S4. The S4 also has lots of camera software updates. Now we've got lots of different things on here. I've covered them in detail in my full S4 review, so do go ahead and click this link and check it out if you want to see more of those features and examples of those. But you've got things like sound in shots, so you've got pictures with sound, dual camera, which is going to allow you to use both the front facing and rear facing camera at the same time, which is again something quite unique and not available on other devices. And you've got things like drama shot as well, which is going to let you take multiple images and put them all in together into one image. Now because these are software based, I don't see why they couldn't be on the S3 as well. Obviously that depends on if Samsung is going to put them onto the S3, some of these new features of the camera. They may want to keep a separation or a bit more of a gap between the S4 and the S3, so that will really depend. But because these are software updates, I wouldn't see why they couldn't be on the S3 as well in the near future, hopefully so. Now in terms of the operating systems, both of these phones are running Android Jelly Bean. However, the S4 comes out of the box with 4.2.2 Jelly Bean, whereas the S3 is currently on 4.1.2. so you're getting the latest version of Android on the S4. Both of these do run the TouchWiz UI above Android, so that's the Samsung skin on there. Now you've got a few more updates in terms of features. A noticeable one is the notifications panel, with swiping down with 2 fingers will give you more access to settings on the S4, whereas the S3 just has the single swipe down. Now the additional features that the S4 has, you've got things like Air View, where you can hover over elements in certain apps and it's going to give you a bit of a preview. You've got Air Gestures, where you can swipe your hand above the device without touching it, and it's going to let you answer calls and things. The IR Blaster on the S4 as well is something very useful. You can control your TV, etc. from the phone itself. Now those are hardware features, however there's a few new software features on the S4 as well, such as Smart Scroll, which is going to track your head movement to scroll on a page. Again, I personally think quite a few of these are quite gimmicky. Probably wouldn't be using them that much. The Smart Pause feature if you look away from your device while you're watching a video on the S4, then it will pause the video. Group Play is going to let you play music across multiple different S4s all together in sync. And then you've got things like S Translator as well. So you've got lots of these new apps. Again, some of these are software apps, so I don't see why technically they could not work on the S3. Once again, it will depend whether Samsung want to put these onto the S3, so we may or may not be seeing some of these software advances on the S3. In terms of storage, both of these are the 16GB versions, and they both have up to 64GB expandable storage through the micro SD card slot. However, in terms of the phones themselves, the S4 has roughly about 9GB of usable storage, whereas the S3 has about 11GB of usable storage. So you're going to get 2 more gigabytes of usable storage. This is because the OS, the updates on all of the features of Samsung's Galaxy S4 take up a lot of space. You're going to be getting more usable storage on the S3 on the device itself. Now looking at the battery, the S4 has a 2600 mAh milliamp battery, whereas the S3 has a 2100 milliamp battery. Now in my day-to-day usage of both of these devices, I found that the S4 does give me slightly more power, so you're looking at roughly about 10 to 20% more juice throughout the day. And when using the S4, usually towards the end of the day, I've got roughly about 30 to 40% battery remaining, whereas on the S3 it's more towards 20 to 30%. So I was expecting the S4 to be taking up more battery because of that high resolution screen, but it does seem to perform a little bit better than the S3. Now one thing to note as well is the S4 is an 4G LTE device, whereas the S3, depending on which version you get, may or may not have 4G LTE, so that's another thing to bear in mind. Price wise, the S4 16GB, you're looking at roughly about 500 to 550 pounds, or $600 to $700 in the US. The S3 currently is going, the 16GB version is going for roughly about 300 to 350 pounds, or $400 to $450. So it is significantly cheaper because it is an older device. So that was my comparison of the Samsung Galaxy S4 to the Samsung Galaxy S3. Is it worth upgrading from the S3 to the S4? Well, currently I don't think it is. I mean, the S3 is still a great phone and it does hold up. The S4 is no doubt one of the best phones out there at the moment, but I don't think it warrants an upgrade from the S3. If you got the S2, then yes, I think that's a good upgrade going over to the S4. And also the other thing you need to consider is most people are on 24-month contracts, and I think Samsung are also aware of this, obviously, so they've not changed the design so much, and maybe because of that reason, because they know a lot of people on the S3 will be on 24-month contracts, so they may be saving something for the S5. Having said that, if you are a tech enthusiast who wants the latest gadgets and has the money for it, then why not? The S4 is a great phone overall, and it's definitely something nice to have. What are your views on both of these devices? Would you upgrade from the S3 to the S4? Do drop me a comment below and let me know your thoughts. And I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button for me. It really does help me out. And why not subscribe to the channel? I've got plenty more videos coming up on here. Thanks for watching. This is Saf on Super Saf TV, and I'll see you next time.